Hi there, this is Opa. When I bought my first house, I was lucky. I had schooling and I'd worked in the electrical field for a long time, so the electrical system was not something that really scared me. But I know not everyone is like that. And so what I'm doing is to make this video to help you understand your electrical system and to help you keep your home safe for little chuckleheads like these guys here that might be over to visit. So stick around and we'll go over some of the very basics of home electrical systems. So electricity flows from the utility system. Now in my case, the electrical utilities are underground, and so it comes through this little stanchion here, or this little box underground where it makes a connection, and then it goes in a pipe underground and then comes up here to the electrical meter. And this is where it enters my house, through the back of this meter. And I'll walk you around and show you in a minute where it comes into my electrical box. Now, your electrical may come from a pole overhead with wires attached to the house, and then it goes down in a pipe to the meter. Same basic ideas, just a slightly different setup. So in my garage, this is my electrical panel. It's kind of in an inconvenient corner, so I'll reach the best I can. And inside this box is where the electricity comes in a conduit, a pipe from the meter outside. Now, closed box like this, everything is safe. As long as you don't have exposed wires, there's nothing to worry about here, nothing that can really cause you any trouble as far as touching it. So I'll start from the top here. This is the main breaker. This is a double pole breaker. You turn this off, that kills electricity to the entire house. So that's an important thing to remember. And then, as you'll see, there are different styles of breakers. I'll talk about them all here real briefly. These big double ones here, these are for the heavy-duty electric appliances, like our dryer, our air conditioning compressor, H2O, okay? That's the water heater, labeled a little weird, okay? You skip down here, these are just regular branch circuit breakers. Just general purpose, an island, a garage. There's one for the furnace. I've got one for my network cabinet. These are just your regular old standard breakers. In newer houses, we've got some different ones. So this one here, this green one, this is called an arc fault circuit interrupter. It works like a regular breaker, but it's got the additional function that if there is a frayed wire, for instance, like in your heating pad plugged into this, it may not be enough to draw enough current to trip the breaker, but it might start sparking. Say your dog has been chewing on that wire, it could spark enough to start a fire. So what this arc fault circuit interrupter does is it'll detect that sparking and it'll trip the breaker off. And it's got a little test button here that you can push it, and it'll test the function of that breaker, and it tripped the breaker here. So now, this is something else I can point out. When a breaker is tripped, any of these style of breakers, it goes to this middle position, okay? It's not all the way in the on position. It's not all the way in the off position. So if you have any kind of a tripped breaker, what you want to do is push it the rest of the way off and then push it the rest of the way back on. These blue ones are a combination of ground fault and arc fault breakers. Still have the same kind of test button on it. So these will detect if there's some kind of a short because of water. So these will be for locations that have a lot of moisture. And I'll show you in a minute what a ground fault receptacle looks like. But these are for things like a dishwasher that maybe it needs to have that protection, but there's not really a practical place to put the plug. And so that's where you see the same thing for the refrigerator, for the washer. So that's the basics of what's going on inside a circuit breaker box. Sometimes these individual breakers, you'll see them, they're actually half height, where you can get 2 breakers. They're real skinny, and it's a 1 unit with 2 breakers in it. So if you start running out of room, sometimes they might use that. Okay, now this kind of breaker you see here is called a ground fault circuit interrupter. And I've got this one in my garage because it is possible, obviously, that if I'm doing something with electrical and I'm standing here in my bare feet on a wet floor, I could get myself a nasty shock that the circuit breaker wouldn't trip, but a ground fault will recognize that that electricity is going through me out to ground, and so it'll trip off. So there's a test button and a reset button on these. So on this particular one, if I push the test button, it trips off. And you see in this model, there's a yellow light that comes on to show it's been tripped, and then I push the other button, it resets it. A lot of these are a little bit different. Sometimes it'll have a green light that's on if everything is working all right, and the green light goes off if it trips. Sometimes if it trips, a red light comes on, and the red light goes off when you reset it. But these are a good idea to test these periodically, just to make sure they're working correctly. And sometimes you can have it set up where additional outlets are wired off of this. So like in my case, this outlet is protected by this ground fault, along with a couple other outlets here on my workbench. I had this at my son's house where he couldn't figure out why none of the outlets on his workbench were working. Well, here it turns out there was a ground fault breaker that had tripped, and it was behind his toolbox, so he couldn't see it very easily. I also had a very interesting story one time at a previous house, because these ground fault breakers are not always where you might expect they're going to be. A lot of times, if it's like a bathroom, what they'll do is they will put this ground fault receptacle someplace that's away from the water source. So like in our current house, our outlets in our bathroom are protected by a ground fault, but the ground fault receptacle that protects them is in the bedroom closet. And so I had a condition one time in a previous house where the outlets in the bathroom quit working. So I thought, okay, must be the ground fault. So I looked around, finally found the ground fault receptacle that these were wired to in the bedroom closet again, around the corner. So I reset it, pushed the reset button on it, thinking, okay, something must have tripped it off. And about 2 seconds later, it trips off again. And I did this about 3 times, and it's like, what the heck is going on? I must have a bad ground fault receptacle. Well, here it turns out this ground fault receptacle also included a plug outside that had a defective set of Christmas lights plugged in. They were getting damp, and so they would trip off the breakers. As soon as I unplugged those Christmas lights and reset the ground fault, everything worked fine. So that's something to keep in mind. Ground fault are usually found, or are supposed to be found, on all of your outside receptacles and all of your receptacles around sinks or water. So that's something to keep in mind. We had a strange case at my mom and dad's old house when they were alive. A receptacle on their back porch quit working. We couldn't figure out why. We finally tracked it down that it was wired off a ground fault receptacle in the upstairs bathroom that was right directly above this plug. Kind of makes sense, I suppose, from the electrician running the wire. It was close. But the thing you got to remember, they normally don't want to put this ground fault receptacle with its test buttons right near the same water source you're trying to prevent problems with. So you normally won't find the ground fault receptacle right above the sink or in the outside, the outdoor outlet. It'll be somewhere else. So these are all the kinds of things that you might run into. And every home's a little bit different, and the older the home gets, the more little strange it might get. Man, is it hot out here today. Couple of safety things to keep in mind. If your outlet feels hot, that could be an indicator of a problem. If you have one light bulb flickering, that's probably just a light bulb that's in the process of dying. But if you have several light bulbs all off the same switch that are all flickering, that could be a sign that the switch is failing or you got a loose wire somewhere. You probably want to get an electrician out to look at it. Don't just ignore it. Or if you've got lights that say your washing machine or an appliance kicks on and your light's noticeably dim, that could be a problem. Something that somebody needs to look at. If you have a breaker that keeps tripping, okay, you're all of a sudden you lose power to an outlet, well, try resetting the breaker. If it trips back off again, then that means something's drawing too much current and the breaker's doing what it's supposed to do. Either, check and see what else might be plugged in. Maybe you just got way too many things plugged into one circuit. So unplug a couple of appliances or whatever and try it again. If it keeps tripping off, leave it off and call an electrician. There's something going on. The breaker's doing its job on protecting against too much current flow through that circuit. And then one more thing, in your breaker box, label the breakers. Do yourself a favor. I'll have a follow-up video to this that shows the use of a simple tool for tracking that down. Of course, you can do it, with a plug-in radio and just some patience of trying all the breakers and spend the Saturday afternoon figuring out what breaker controls what rooms or whatever. Another thing to keep in mind then, like I say, label your breaker box, but check the breaker box periodically. Every month or two, just open it up, maybe kind of lay your hand against it if everything's all closed up nice like this. And if something feels hot, that's not a good thing. It's not supposed to be running hot. If you hear a buzzing sound or something like that, that's not a good thing. That could be an indicator of a problem. And obviously, if you have a burning smell, that ain't a good thing either. So any of those things, you'll want to get an electrician out to take a look at it. And if your house is more than 30 years old, maybe you bought it and you really don't know all the history of it, may not be a bad thing to have an electrician come out and just take a look at it. Make sure everything is safe. If you've got some things you might want to upgrade, you could talk to him about that. He may make some suggestions about things that would be good to do, even if they're not necessarily required by electrical code. But you want to make sure it's safe. Something goes wrong with your furnace, your air conditioning system, it'll get uncomfortable. It can get hot in the house. It can get too cold, whatever. Something goes wrong with the plumbing. You may have some water around. Something goes wrong with the electrical. Worst case, somebody can get seriously injured or it can lead to a fire. So you suspect problems with your electrical system. That's not something to mess around with or to take lightly. So anyways, hopefully this video helped you. I will follow up here and I'll leave a link to a follow-up video on some simple test equipment that you may want to invest in, or at least see how it works to help you understand better what's going on with your home electrical system. So yeah, anyways, enough of this. Like I say, it's all about keeping your family safe, and that's what this What's Up OPA channel is all about, taking care of your home and taking care of the people in it that you love. So for now, signing off. I'll get back inside where it's cool. This is OPA, hoping that wherever you are and whenever you're watching this, that you have a great day. Thanks a lot.